We're back in the shop for the second video in the Building a Fiddle series. In the first video we covered information, having a plan, kind of a direction, choosing your wood, and we even went so far as to make some sawdust, and we did some preliminary rough cutting, so to speak, on the table saw, and we cut out some sides. In the first video I showed you that piece of cherry that I'm going to be using, and then I got all wound up and I dove right in and I cut it into the shape of a fiddle. And I want to apologize. Hold your horses just a little bit. If this is your first time building and you're trying to follow along like it's a step-by-step video, I want to encourage you, watch through, take notes. I may get things out of order, but for this moment, what you should have should look something like this. You'll either have your slab cut, or you'll have laminated two pieces together, and you'll have an idea of where you're going to cut the outline of your fiddle. I want to throw out a little tip for you regarding book matching your top or your back. Now you've got your block of wood, you run it through the saw, here's your two pieces. Your intent is to laminate these two together, and you want a terrific joint. Hold them up to a light. You should see no daylight between these two. But chances are you will. And it's not really the fault of your saw. You may even run it through a planer and still have that tiny hairline of daylight you can just see. Well, here's a little tip to square this thing up. I picked up an old Stanley No. 4 plane. I removed the blade and the iron from it, and using some spray adhesive, I glued on a piece of a sanding belt to the bottom. Now what's interesting about these old planes is this surface is 90 degrees perfectly. This allows me to true up the edge of my piece of wood, and it's usually just what I need to make that laminated joint perfect. This is an old Stanley No. 5 plane. I picked it up at a second-hand shop a while ago for, I think, $35. Now sitting here is my future belly plate. I've book matched my two pieces. I have a nice glue joint. But while I was in the clamps, the two pieces were off just a hair. And I need to plane these down nice and level and flat. Well, this is just the ticket. I would really encourage you to go on YouTube and watch some of the videos of the fellas showing how to use these old hand tools. It is well worth the time, and in many instances, this old tool will do a better job than a fancy new power tool. Now that you have the wood for the top and back of your fiddle kind of roughed out, set that aside. The next step is to build the garland. The garland is just a fancy name for the outside edges of the fiddle. And that brings up the topic of the form. My forms are just cut from a piece of 3/4 inch plywood. The little notches are to locate the corner and end blocks, and the holes are for clamping purposes. To build your fiddle mold, you're going to get yourself a piece of 3/4 inch plywood. This is a leftover piece of birch from building the workbench. You want to use your inside template, line it up with the center line. I just show the pencil line. Trace it. We're going to flip it, do the same on the opposite side. Once again, I show the pencil line. Now, if you don't have an inside template to work with and all you have is an outside template, like this, let me show you something. The difference between the outside template and the inside template is 3.75 to 4 millimeters. You can figure this out on your own and then just use a compass to draw your line. Now the size and even the material for the corner and end blocks is not hypercritical. For my corner blocks I use spruce, 7/8 of an inch by 1 inch. And for the end blocks I also use spruce, 3/4 of an inch by 2 inches. Now the height of these is determined by the height of your ribs. And I cut my cherry ribs at 31 millimeters. You're allowed a fair amount of leeway here depending on the pattern you're using. Anywhere from 28, 28.5 millimeters all the way up to 32 millimeters. Draw a line between the points on opposite sides, point to point. Like so. Then you want to make a parallel line 1/4 of an inch towards the center on both sides. Like that. Now we're going to mark a line 1/4 inch outboard of all 4 points. Like so. Using the line and the mark we placed on the wood, we will strike a 90-degree angle to help us locate our corner block. And then we just mark off the appropriate sized area. The shaded part is what will be removed. Now we make a mark 3/4 of an inch down from the top and another one 3/4 of an inch from the bottom. And we strike ourselves a perpendicular line to that mark. And we line up on it with a ruler, and we're going to need 1 inch on either side of it, and another 90-degree mark off of that. And it should look like that, and we will be removing the shaded section. Now you want to locate the holes for your clamps. I come 2 inches up from the bottom, 1, 2. And 2 inches down from the top, and I drill a 1-inch hole there. You're going to want one here, here, one for each corner block, one for the C-bout. Put them where you feel is best. Now take your piece of plywood, should look something like this, and take it over to the bandsaw or your jigsaw. Make sure that blade is at 90 degrees. Cut it just proud, just outside the pencil line, and then sand or file it down to the pencil line, maintaining that nice 90-degree edge. And then you can cut out your little notches and take your drill and drill out your holes for your clamps. So now you should have something that looks kind of like this. And you spent next to nothing and have a real nice fiddle mold to work with. Now make sure you're right on it. What pattern you use, stick the date on there somewhere so you can look back, because you're going to catch the fever, and I'm betting you'll make more than one of these. The next step is to glue these blocks temporarily onto our form. Now note the orientation of the grain of the blocks. This is what I do. From here on out, we're going to be using hot hide glue, and it comes in these little crystals or flakes, and we're going to liquefy it using a ratio of 1 to 1, 1 part water, 1 part glue flakes. Put your glue flakes and your water in a small container, such as this one I stole from the wife, and let it set in a hot water bath for a good hour. And then get in there and stir it. Now, you can spend a ton of money and buy a fancy glue pot from International Violin or Stumac, or you can hunt around for a inexpensive little $10, $15 crock pot, which does a wonderful job. I use these little acid brushes they sell at the hardware store for soldering, and I cut the bristles a little shorter. These work great and cost next to nothing. Now I'm going to apply a small dab of glue to that red mark to attach my corner block, and no more, or it will never come off. Alright, let's use a small dab of glue on here, on that little mark. And then we'll apply our corner block in the right orientation here, and a clamp. These little clamps you see me using are available at Harbor Freight for just a couple of bucks a piece. And we should be looking something like this. And we take our brush out of our hide glue. I just stick it in the water bath and rinse it off. The glue is water soluble. And we need to cover our glue. Treat it in general like food. If you're not using it, throw it in the refrigerator. The beautiful thing about this glue is it is going to set up pretty quick. Here we are, about an hour and a half, 2 hours later. I pulled the clamps off. Now what you want to do is take your inside template and lay it on top here so you can mark out the points that you're going to be cutting out on your corner blocks. I'm going to go over to my little bandsaw to cut these corner blocks and end blocks, and then I'm going to take my little spindle sander I made and I'm going to sand these curves. But there's more than one way to skin a cat. The other way to go about this is going to be to take your chisel, knock off the excess wood, and then get yourself a half-round file and file it down. You can even wrap sandpaper around a dowel. The important thing is keep this nice and square. Just to show you it's not that big a deal, I'm going to take this chisel and show you how easy it is to knock this down. It's a nice straight grain, so see it splits nice and straight. Take a little more off of this side. Just take tiny bits off at a time. Now look how close I got in just a few seconds. Now we can take my half-round file and clean that up pretty quick. Here's the little homemade spindle sander I made. This is a $55 El Cheapo drill press. The little table lets me come right up to the spindle sander, right here. See the little homemade sander at work. There, how's that look? Not bad. I do all my final shaping with the file to get it just the way I want it, right down into that pencil line. And you'll notice, if you look close, I've got tape on there. And that tape protects the mold while I'm sanding and filing, so I don't ruin my nice mold. And then I'm going to repair that tape, replace it, so that when I glue on my sides, they don't get glued to the mold, just to the blocks themselves. Well, the corner blocks and end blocks are all done and looking sharp. We are that close to adding the sides and building our garland, which is exciting. One more thing we need before we jump into bending the sides. I'm willing to bet if you looked online for a nice pre-made form, it did not come with this magical little Ziploc baggie. Some other parts that we need here. Ta-da! We need these little blocks for clamping to fit these curves. So when we have our sides bent to shape and ready to go on, we are ready to clamp them in place. Alright, there's one more thing we need to do before we start bending our sides to assemble our corpus. We need to thickness our sides. Now when these came off the saw, they were 1 1/2 millimeters thick, and we're shooting for 1. There are 2 basic ways to thickness these. You can grab the good old power sander, 220 grit sandpaper, and have at it. That is not a bad idea. I would not discourage that. It works well, especially if you have a lot of meat to take down. Now, scraping is the classic way to do it, and it is very effective. I never scraped anything before I made a fiddle, and this has opened my eyes. It's a marvelous way to smooth and take down wood. So this brings me to a tool alert for you. You are most certainly going to need a few scrapers, at least these 2. Now here's a set on StewMac that I would recommend. Honestly, International Violin has slightly better prices than StewMac. They ship right away. They have some nice sets. They are more violin or fiddle oriented. So I would encourage you to get online and pick out a nice little set of 2, 3, or 4 little scrapers and get them ordered. You are going to be needing them, and you're going to use them a lot more than you think you will. And look around on YouTube and watch some videos on burnishing or resharpening these little babies. It will be worth your time. This is how I'm going to thickness my cherry sides. I picked up this little plane at a second-hand store, and it's real handy for small work. And I use that to take down some of the high spots, and it does really nice, makes these nice shavings. And then I use my scraper to take it down, and I get these real nice little curls. Here we are about, 20 minutes or so later, and I've got my sides all ready to go. Isn't that pretty grain, huh? Alright, are you ready to bend wood? This is where it's going to get really exciting. This is my rib bending device. This is a Wagner heat gun, and it sits in here. This is just made out of cast iron pipe from the hardware store. Here's a closer look. There are 2 different diameter pipes to help me with different radius bends, and there is sand down in this lower part to protect the wood as the air gets awful hot. I usually run the gun on high and then drop it down to low and let it just idle on that setting, and it's the perfect temperature. This is all available at the hardware store for short money, or you can go online and spend yourself a couple of $100 on a real fancy thermostatically controlled bending rig. We're going to do the 2 C-bouts first on the left and the right side, and then let them dry overnight. We want the water to dance just about hot enough. It's kind of like getting ready for pancakes. Alright, so now we're going to just wet the sides. And I'm only wetting the side that I'm bending right now. That high temperature drives the steam into the grain of the wood. And once it reaches the right temperature, it bends like butter. You can use a little block of wood to hold it on the iron, because it does get quite hot. See that? You can even unbend it a little bit if you got carried away. Put heat on the back side and pressure, And you can take some of the bend out as you're fitting it to your C-bout. It will take a few tries to get it to fit just right, but it's worth being patient. Here's our very first C-bout. Kind of test fit into place. Now we'll cut off the excess and add some clamps. Now a little hot hide glue and a couple of clamps, and we're in business. Alright, so just, I don't want to say be sparing. We want to cover the corner block area completely, but we don't want to slather it all into the crack and cause this to stick to the mold. Alright. Then we just gotta clamp it down. Now the glue sets real fast. You don't have a lot of time to work. It'll get sticky and then kind of like jelly. So kind of have everything laid out. Be ready to go. Even do a test run, a trial run. Okay? Apply your glue. Put your piece in. Know where it's going. Have your clamp ready. Alright? Like that. Now one more side. All set. Now they should be flush on the back. That's the nice thing about this mold. Just press them right down flush with the table. We'll let this dry overnight. Take the clamps off. And here we are. Well, that's going to look really nice. Look at that. Pretty cherry. Okay. We have to cut off the excess now. About where that pencil line is that I've marked, a little proud of the corner block. You need to leave that extra little bit coming off the C-bout so you have the length for the taper you need to meet the adjoining side. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. This is what you're shooting for, something like this. Now, we bend, fit, and glue the rest of our pieces on our mold to complete the garland. On this fiddle, I'm doing the entire upper bout here with a single strip, but you can use two smaller pieces, and you don't have to be super particular about this seam because the neck is going to go here. On the lower bout, generally, we have two strips, and you want a nice seam right here on the central line. Now, if it doesn't come out perfect, don't freak out. You can cut a little V and insert a little wedge like you see on the bottom of a custom guitar. It will look sharp and everyone will think you did it on purpose. I have bent and dry fit all my final pieces to the mold. And here's a gluing tip of what works for me. I'm going to start here with this joint on the tail block. I'm going to remove this clamp and I'm going to glue these pieces right here and get that joint nice. Reapply the clamp, and then I'm going to do this corner and then this corner. Up in the upper bout, I'm going to remove this clamp, glue this and reapply the clamp, and then work my way around. Then I'll do this joint and then lastly this one. And the next morning you get to pull off your clamps and look at your handiwork, your beautiful garland that's nearly complete. Of course, you're going to want to cut off the excess, file your points, make them look nice. Use your scraper to clean up the outside and smooth it. And remember at the beginning of the video I told you to hold your horses with drawing the outline on your top or your back. This becomes your template for that in part 3 of how to build a fiddle, and I'll see you next time. I don't know if you've seen this fiddle before. This fiddle is mahogany, bird's eye maple, hand-carved rosewood fretboard. and a red cedar top. Hopefully this gives you a little inspiration to finish your fiddle